So we're gonna go ahead and test this to make sure that it's working as expected. The first thing I want to do is to go into the authentication failure, and I'm gonna put a breakpoint right here on line 22, and then I'm gonna go into the authentication success and put another one right here on line 21. That way we can check to make sure that the actual execution is coming into here depending on what happens. And then in the actual user service implementation, I'm going to put a breakpoint on 67 just right here on the if statement. So I'm going to go ahead and run the application in debug mode right now, and then I'm going to let it come up. Once it's up, then we're going to go ahead and test it. So the application is up. Right now I'm going to pull Postman and we're going to go ahead and check. So the first thing I want to do is to send a successful request, right? So I'm going to put in the correct username and the correct password, and then I'm going to send it in. So let's send it over, and now our breakpoint should fire. So the first breakpoint comes into here. Okay, so because it's not going to go into the success listener yet, right here, it's not going to come in here yet because the user has not been successfully authenticated. At this point, Spring Security is just grabbing the user. So we pass this if statement, which means we actually found, Spring Security found a user by that username, which we expected because we passed in a correct username. Okay, so now we can check to see what happens here. So it should go from this if statement to line 73 because this account is not locked. So let's step. Well, this account was locked. Well, no, the account is not locked. That's correct. So the account is not locked. It's going to check to see if they have exceeded their max attempt. Okay, so let's take a look at this user real quick. So let's look at is not locked. True. Okay, so their account is not locked and their account is active. So everything on this user is good. Okay, so it's going to go in here and then it's going to go and skip this. So let's go again. As you can see, it skips it. It set this to true again, just to be safe. Okay, we didn't really have to add this line on 71 here, but just to be safe, we're just gonna set it to true. So this was false, which means they didn't exceed the maximum number of times they're allowed to try to log in. Okay, so I'm gonna step again, and this is gonna finish. So I'm gonna let it run through. So now, the code execute and did a bunch of other things, and then now it's here, which means the authentication was successful. So we know that this is working because the code comes in here, which means this authentication was successful. So we can step over this, and if you can check here to see, here we have the principal, and then we're going to cast that principal. So step once, and as you can see, so the code went from 22 and jumped to 26, which means this principal was not an instance of user. And as you can see, it says this principal right here in gray is an instance of user principal. Okay, so that's something we have to fix. So this is not going to be an instance of user, but of user principal. And the reason I'm catching this right now, which is the whole point of debugging this, is if you look here in the, let's scroll down a little bit. So if you look here in the load user by username, we're returning a user principal, as you can see here, user principal. So it's not going to be a user, but actually a user principal. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to copy this, and in here, I'm going to do this. Okay. So, and I'm also going to change this as well to user principal. Okay. So this is not going to be a user, but user principal. And here I can just let this finish. Okay. So let this finish. Okay, so now if we go back here, we can see we got a 200. So that was successful because we put in the correct information. And then we have all the information back. So we have in the body, we have the user information, and then the headers, we have our JWT token. Okay, so this is all good. Now, what I want to do is to send the wrong password. So let's go back and restart the application because we made some code changes. So here I'm gonna stop it and I'm gonna start it back up, but this time I'm not gonna use the breakpoint because I already see that it's going through where it's supposed to go through. You can do more debugging if you want, but I already know, so I don't need to do that at this time, but you can go ahead and try that as well. So, and then I think I have another one right here. So I'm going to remove all the breakpoints, and I'm going to start the application again in normal mode, and then let it come up. So the application is back up. I'm going to go ahead and send the same request. I'm not going to change the password now. Just going to send the request so that you guys can see it. So send. Again, successful. Okay, so we get the response in the body, check the headers. We have a JSON Web Token. Now, if we try to send this request with the wrong password 5 times or more, then the account should be disabled. So let's go and, I don't know, put some random characters here. So let's put some 9s and then send the request. And then it says username and password incorrect. Send it again. That's 2. So let's send it again. 3. Send it again. 4. And right now, the next one, it should disable the account. Send it again. Well, okay, so that's 5. So it has to be equal or greater than 5. Okay, so on the 6th one, it should disable the account. We're still within the 15 minutes. So on this last request, the account should be disabled. So send again. And here it is. So it says your account has been locked. Please contact administration. So on the 6th attempt, the account gets locked. Okay. So if I remove those 9s now and send it again, the account is still locked. Okay. So we give him 5 tries, which is what we coded here. If you remember, if we go into the login attempt service, if we go in here, we give him 5. And you can change that number to whatever you want. So it's going to say to see if it's equals to 5 or greater than 5. So on the 6th attempt, it's going to stop you, which is what it just did here. Okay, so you can see now the account is locked. And then you can, proceed with this however you want. Maybe you're going to have to go in every 3 days, or maybe check some emails where they can email you, or maybe you're going to have an email be sent to you whenever someone's account is locked, or whatever the case might be. But that's how you would, that's one way you can actually stop brute force attack, because then now the account is locked. Like there's nothing they can do because their account is locked. They just have to contact you. And if we go into the database, and right now we have is active is 1, which is true, and is not locked is 1, which is true. So if we refresh now, is not locked to be 0. So refresh, as you can see, is not locked is 0. So it's also updated in the database. And the reason for this is because we actually saved the user. If we go back to the user implementation, you can see every time this executes, we save the user in the repository. So once we do all the check, we set all the flags that we need to set, then the user is also saved before it's returned to Spring Security here. So you can test this further if you would like. You can just come in here and then change this to a 1, which is gonna make the account active again, just like that. And change this to a number and apply, finish. So now the account is not locked again. So if we try this again, well, I'm gonna make this wrong and try. It says username password incorrect. So you can test this as many times as you want. And if I remove the 3 P's and I'm gonna leave the 3 P's. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then next one, it should be disabled. 6. There we go. So your account has been locked. Please contact administration. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope you can use this in some useful ways. Maybe you can implement it in your system or whatever the case might be. But at least I wanted to show you one way you can mitigate this. So, and one last thing is, as you can see here, if we go back to the app, I'm actually using the username as the key. Like I'm and if we look into the login attempt service, I'm actually using the username as the key here. Another very popular option is to actually look at the IP address, okay, so that you can block a specific IP address if they keep trying to brute force your system. But in our case, we're just using the actual username. And if you wanted to use the actual IP address, you can actually do that pretty easily. I mean, the implementation for the cache would be different. Instead of having some username check, you would probably have something else to check for the IP address. But you would just bring in the actual request in, and then you can get the IP address from there. But I wanted to do it using the username. I'm just telling you that there are different ways you can stop brute force attack.